welcome to CityU campus and this seminar on legal and administrative controversies of Chinese foreign direct investment in Chile. I'm Linda Lee, Director of Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong and a professor at the Department of Public and International Affairs. Today, this is Hong Kong is getting hotter, right? Now it seems to be we are having an early spring and even into early summer. And with the raised political heat in the last couple of days, maybe this is a kind of a diffusion of the heat, right, across the Atlantic and the Pacific. So it's high time for us to talk about money matters, political matters, and legal matters in a calm and scientific evidence-based manner in a university setting, okay? So with that, we hope our science can help and contribute to potentially better politics and better governance and better economy in the future. So today we are most pleased to have invited Professor Juan Serrano Moreno from University of Chile to talk about this most important topic. Professor Juan, I'm most happy to welcome him back to CityU campus because we, I think in 2019, okay, we the CityU and Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong, we have hosted a seminar with John also as our one of our co-speakers. At the time, Hong Kong is undergoing a lot of dramatic changes, and so was the situation in Chile. Okay, and before that, John actually has a very good time and very important juncture at CityU as well in his earlier days as a student. So we are most happy and honored to have him back, okay, after some years, and then to share with us his insights and his recent research on Chile situation and also the Chinese FDI in Chile. I learned from Juan that he and his colleagues has co-established a new research center for the impact of China in Latin America and the Caribbean in his University of Chile. So I hope with this new platform, we look forward to more collaboration and exchanges of views between Hong Kong and City University and our center and with University of Chile and his research center. And today, I'm also very happy to have our colleague, Professor Linda Tjia, to be the discussant of Juan's presentation in a while. And then I'm also very honored to see our Consul General of Chile to join us in the audience, okay? So please share with us your insights and comments in a little bit, okay? And welcome to our lot of friends, either in this room, in fact, and also we have more joining us online, okay? From our list, we have faculty members, we have students, from other parts of the world, and we have faculty from other institutions joining us in the packed schedule. So without further ado, may I invite pass the time to Juan? Yeah.
For these warm words. It's my pleasure and my honor to be back on CityU, and thank you very much again, Linda, for the invitation, and Linda for the discussion we're gonna have today. So yeah, I'm gonna present this study we are doing in my university with a few colleagues about FDI, Chinese investment in Latin America, specifically in Chile. So this is a hot topic right now. There are a lot of scholars working on Chinese investment in Latin America. So today we're gonna focus on some projects that are more problematic. these are we can see these 4 projects. No, we could make another presentation another day, maybe another seminar about the projects who are successful, right? The impact of the Chinese investment in Latin America and in Chile has been positive overall. It has created jobs, it has created GDP growth, etc. We don't have to forget that. But when we are scholars, being a scholar, you look for problems to solve, right? We are not here to just describe some, boring reality, but to try to learn from the most problematic cases. And Chile is a good opportunity to do so. So actually, this study is trying to mix an international relation perspective with questions that are very important, very present nowadays in the international relations literature, about decoupling, about rivalry, geopolitical rivalry between the US and China. Where is South America going? It's going to the Chinese side, it's going to the American side, etc. So trying to answer these big questions for our time with a legal perspective. So as I have a original training as a lawyer and as a political science, I have both education originally. So this was a good opportunity to try to go beyond the common places about these controversies that I'm pointing out today in Chile that happened in the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years. So try to analyze deeply all the documents, the resolutions, the norms, etc., to make some sense out of it and answer the big questions that are worrying us every day and more after the Trump election, isn't it? So yeah, these are the 4 cases I'm gonna focus today. First, the acquisition of Tjia company is like one electric company of Chile who has been bought by State Grid, a state-owned company. Then I will talk about the civil registry identification system tender involving Aicino Corporation. So this is a case of, it's not an investment, it's a public procurement from the government of Chile to produce the passports and IDs, who was allocated to a Chinese company, and then the decision was revoked. So it's not an investment, strictly speaking, it's not an FDI, but it is an important case of Chinese companies trying to do business in Chile with the administration. Then I'm going to talk about 2 cases of dams, of public infrastructure with a concession contract allocated to Chinese companies that didn't work so well. And at the end, we're going to talk about the most complicated case because it's hard to analyze. We don't have so much data on it. It's more sensitive, about the Trans-Pacific Humboldt internet cable. That's the internet cable, that undersea internet cable that will connect South America with Asia and Australia. So let's get into it. So the big question, of course, of this presentation, of this study is Chile protecting its strategic sector, strategic resources, as other Western countries are doing. We observe this trend of Western countries weaponizing its public economic law system to screen foreign investment, to improve the transparency on public procurements and public tendering. All of that due to national security reasons, right? So national security is like the big open concept being introduced in many legal systems around the world in this new context. So Chile is doing that, is really improving, is really reforming its model of public economic law or not. So actually our hypothesis is that not at all. And actually these cases that we are gonna talk today prove that there is no real strategy. We are like improvising. It's a colleague of mine who has published a paper recently that he talks about strategic ambiguity. I don't know how strategic this ambiguity is. I know it's ambiguous, but I don't know how strategic it is. So it's an open discussion about what is the strategy for Latin American countries. So we try to find out our own hedging strategy, like the ASEAN countries are doing. Shall we rely with the US? Shall we rely with China, etc.? So what are, like concretely speaking, going beyond a repeat, the common places, if we look into the legal cases, legal controversies, and legal bodies, do we see an evolution toward this securitization of international economic relations or not? This is the big question we are trying to answer with this study and others ones. Okay, so the answer, as I said, the hypothesis is that Chile is not really prepared, or at least its economic administrative law. Specifically, we are talking about the antitrust law, public procurement law, and environmental law. It's not really, these bodies, these legal realms are not ready to navigate this geopolitical shifts we're observing right now. And the reasons for that are basically two. Basically, there are two. First, we observe, and we're going to try to show today, we observe structural institutional weaknesses. There are many repeat institutional weaknesses. The public administration is not up to the role, as simple as that. And secondly, we see an increasing US influence. The US State Department is really pushing harder and harder since 2018 in order to reduce Chinese influence, especially in decisions involving cybersecurity, telecom, and public infrastructure. So, well, the methodology of this study is nothing complicated. This study doesn't have a complex methodology. We are just analyzing legal documents, especially administrative resolutions, because you know that in Chile, as in continental Europe, we don't have common law. We have a European continental law system, which is not so much based in precedent, but it's more based in codes, no? in norms. And also it has its own a public law system. We have like a parallel, let's call a legal system, private and public. So as a lawyer myself, I specialized on that, on public law, when I was working as a lawyer in like environmental law, public procurement law. So I used this expertise to analyze legal documents that are not so easy to study when you are a political science or international relations expert. So that was the gamble, okay? So, and also, of course, we have some news and public reports, etc., to complete the study. Okay, some background about the relation between Chile and China. Well, I know that not everybody knows much about Chile and specifically the relations with China. So some very fast facts. So first, the relation started in 1917. It didn't went off during the dictatorship, which is usually put forward in the official discourse. So the relation were very pragmatic since the beginning. That's what official statement usually reminds us. Also, the APEC forum was a very important space to deep these relations. China was member of this forum in 91, Chile in 94. And actually during the summits of APEC, both countries started to negotiate the FDI, the free trade agreement that was signed in 2006 and came into force in 2008 or 2007. Also remind you that Chile is a country with more than 50 free trade agreements, and the only country with Costa Rica with a free trade agreement with both with the US and China. This is not something common in the world, to have a free trade agreement with China, European Union, and US. So if the geopolitical scenario keeps evolving or devolving, I don't know if this advantage is going to be a real one or it's going to be the opposite. Let's see in the next years how it turns. Also, Chile and China became in 2016 comprehensive strategic partners. This is instrument from Chinese diplomacy. So let's not talk more about this. It's a bit too specialized. And in 2018, Chile joined the Belt and Road Initiative. But more than that, Chile lobbied with other Latin American countries to do the same. Chile was one of the Latin American countries who bet on that initiative more. So now China and Chile relations are dominated by trade. This is what everybody knows when we talk about this topic. It really talks about trade, of course. So as you know, like around 40% of Chile's exports, global Chile exports, are sent to China. So we talk about, many scholars as myself, we talk about growing economic dependence. I repeat, almost 40% of the total export of Chile goes to China. That's a lot. Yep. Especially if you compare it with Argentina or Brazil, we have a more diversified export destination base. And even more, within these total exports, 66% or more are copper and its derivatives. So we send, I repeat, 40% of export to China, and within this export, more than 66% are copper and other related products. So yeah, so we are very dependent on the good health of the Chinese economy to keep growing as a country. Also, in 2018, the chapter about agricultural products of the free trade agreement came into force. So after 2018, Chile can export agricultural products with zero tariff. That created a big structural change in the agricultural sector. As you may all know, the cherry boom or the cherry burst that has just exploded this year, actually, which is very bad because we made another paper about the global chains of cherry global chains and the exports from Chile to China, and it has become kind of outdated. We sent it like 3 months ago, and maybe we'll have to rewrite it again because for some reasons the cherry price has really decreased suddenly this year. It's like half of last year. Actually. So you see how, and you see how the economic dependence works. No? You have an agricultural sector that everybody's betting on one product, then the product is not working anymore. What do? No? You have taken out like all trees that made pears or apples to put more cherry trees. And then what you do with cherry trees, if the Chinese middle class are not so fan of cherries anymore, they may like, I don't know, white strawberries or something. That was my cousin's wife was telling me about that the new trend is to buy white strawberries instead of Chilean cherries. So you see, this is a little bit the situation about trade, bilateral trade. And of course, the imports are mainly cars. I also have to say that I see much more Chinese cars in Chile than in Hong Kong. Of course, it has to do with the income, I guess, of both countries. But it tells you about the other problem there. This is the dependence theory of my colleague, my political economist colleagues. They always talk about that. Of course, we know that this dependence creates a desindustrialization, lack of industrialization in your own country, as all the resources are focused on the export of raw materials. Could be copper, it could be cherries, could be oil in some other countries, etc. So we don't have manufacturing power except in the mining sector. Okay, so now let's talk about investment, Chinese investment in Chile. So first, just the big idea here is that the Chinese FDI in Chile came late and little. It came later than our neighbor countries, Brazil, Argentina, etc., Colombia. But it came, and also it has never been too big in terms of stock, of total stock compared to our neighbors. So it came, the real numbers tell you that it really started to grow in 2016, not before. So yeah, and also we have to remind you that we're studying this, in many papers, there's many studies about this. I'm just trying to summarize everything. Okay, we can characterize this FDI evolution as latecomer, and based mainly in merchant acquisition operations. This is important to underline it because the official diplomatic discourse about involving the Belt and Road Initiative is all about connectivity, and that means like real things that you can touch, right? That you can get in, like a train or an airport or internet cable, right? So in the fact, we don't see that. We see like Chinese companies buying local companies, okay? But we don't see an increase of productive capacities. We don't see, we see a little impact on terms of employment, but not so big in terms of numbers, especially in terms of skilled jobs. The managers come from China. So in terms of employment, the investment hasn't really produced much. And in terms of technological transfer, neither. So yeah. Also the largest operation so far, it happened in 2018 with Tianqi brought 24% of SQM, which is one of the biggest lithium companies in the world, okay? Yeah, we can talk about that more in the discussion if you want, about this operation and the late developments about lithium. So, yeah. So why did the FDI investment in Chile came late and little? So there are many explanations. The literature points out many reasons. First, Chile is a small market. It's the third biggest economy in total GDP in the region, but still is a small market. And it's a market in which the foreign companies, Western companies are already present. So if you compare the stock or FDI stock, total stock of FDI in Chile by country, you can see that this is a bit outdated. It's finished in 2020. But you can see that this is still very low compared to Canada, Spain, USA, Italy, etc. Right? So this is the idea. And also the other common explanation of why the Chinese investment came so late is because bureaucracy. Even the own government, they have this quote here, Invest Chile, which is an official body, explain why the Chinese investment is more concentrated in Latin American countries than in Chile is because of the complex permits and approvals that the Chilean legislation requires. This is a bit surprising explanation. It's a bit a common place, but it tells you a little bit the problematic that we're going to study later. So this is about just some characterization about the FDI. So you see here for sectors, you can see energy, mining, and infrastructure are the biggest sector that receive the Chinese investment, as in other Latin American countries. So here it confirms what we know already. It confirms like the objectives also of diplomacy with the Belt and Road Initiative and so on. And in terms of operations, you can see that the biggest operations in amount of US dollars are in mining, energy, and infrastructure too. So here we have like the first is the operation I told you about in lithium in 2018 with Tianqi, both some stakes of SQM. And then we're going to talk about the second one in the energy sector, okay? Yeah, well, just so you know, you can check this later if you want. I can send you the PowerPoint with all the info. And now the latest development about the FDI is the controversy around it, the controversy cases around it. So just as an example of it, we see recently in November last year, 2024, in the APEC summit in Lima, President Boric and President Xi, of course, they met as they always do in these summits. And Chinese government, through the Xinhua News in Spanish, they kind of criticized it, the last developments. They talk openly about discrimination. Like Chinese companies are discriminated in Chile. That's like the official discourse. And you can check the source if you want. I'm just simplifying a little bit, but it's a moderate protest in diplomatic terms. But it has been involved. The embassies are involved in some cases that we're gonna look into now. So about the background, also just to mention very fast, this public economic law and national security. This is a growing topic, as I said in the introduction. I'm not gonna talk about it much. So just so you know what we're talking about three instruments that the governments can use for this securitization of international economic relations. First, of course, we have the trade war, okay, tariffs and restriction on imports and export. Secondly, we have the inward FDI screening, that we're going to talk about it a little bit. And third, we have the public contracts restriction. No? Like some countries are creating new rules to improve the transparency in public tenders, to mitigate the risk involving foreign governments subsidizing their companies that will have some unfair advantage in the tendering competition procedure, right? Okay, so FDI screening, we have a few examples. I mean, the US, of course, the first one in the 70s, during the first chip war with Japan. European Union quite late and not so well, actually. The European Union regulation is the Reglamento Europeo, the regulation of 2019 that doesn't work so well. Actually, I have some colleagues lawyers in Spain and France that tell me that it's not really working. But well, it's something that we didn't have before. Of course, this regulation in 2018 was adopted after China started to invest more in Europe, specifically the both German company with some robotic technology that was going to be transferred back to China. So they start to protect some strategic sector. United Kingdom in 2021, Singapore 2014, Philippines, they also did it recently by an amendment. But in Latin America, we don't have anything like that. Okay, so this FDI screen is like a hot topic. We host a seminar recently with the UK embassy in our institute talking about this. So they were like making the tour, you know, Argentina, Chile, Peru, trying to lobby in order that our governments will have some reform to improve, to create something like this, that this is FDI screening mechanism with the creation of an agency or a bureau. And actually, this lobbying is the first time we have some public proof of it is here in the Financial Times a year ago, 2 years, almost 2 years, 1 year and a half ago, in November 23. There's an article in Financial Times talking about Washington has suggested to several Latin American countries that each one create a government committee to vet foreign investment in strategic sectors on grounds of national security, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Okay, here at left, we have the picture of the construction of the Chancay port in Peru, which is the biggest port in South America, and is being built by a Chinese company and is subject of a lot of controversy recently, etc. So yeah, I have to say too that we know, I mean, off the record we knew, now we know on the record because it's in Financial Times, so we can say, but off the record we knew that the Spanish embassy and the US embassy were having meetings in Santiago with scholars, politicians, journalists, trying to push this agenda, trying to talk about the good practices of the FDI screening procedures and maybe try to convince Chilean key actors to try to discuss a little bit about the opportunity to create it, okay? So yeah, this is an important precedent. Okay, so now we are gonna talk about the case studies that I selected for today. So first, the electric sector, no? So we have this Tjia case. So, okay, the cases are a bit complicated to explain because it's a lot of legal jargon, okay, a lot of legal text and dates and resolution numbers. So I don't want to bore you too much. So I'm gonna try to jump into the key facts here. In the discussion, we can go deeper. If you want a more detailed explanation of the reasoning behind every decision. But basically, it's like this, no? So we have the State Grid International Limited, a Chinese state-owned company, acquired around 86% for $3 billion of the stakes of General Electric Enterprise, which is a company in Chile. But this company, this General Electricity Enterprise in Chile, it was already owned by Naturgy, which is a Spanish-Italian company. Okay, so the company was already on the hands of a foreign capital, so use exchange hands. This company is very important. It delivers like 3 million households. It's an electric provider. So they around 3 million people electricity. So we have ex officio and ex ante procedure. So there is no anyone went to court. It was an automatic mechanism by the National Economic Prosecution Service, Fiscalía Nacional Económica, I repeat, National Economic Prosecution Service, that is obliged to open an investigation when an operation like this happened by automatically, I repeat, ex officio. And so it's a mechanism to control merge and acquisition operations that could create anti-competition effects, right? So the resolution of the prosecution service or prosecution office was very clear. They made some inquiries. They asked some key actors in the sector, and they literally, I mean, you have the text here. You can read it when I'm talking or later. But it's the first time we see like national security, national interest, this kind of jargon of new terms that today are more and more usual. It's the first time we see it in a public document in March 2021. I repeat. And also the resolution, the document, it says very clear that there is no any legal base for this entity to go beyond the antitrust law. We only control the behavior of the market. We don't go into other topics, political or geopolitical or whatever. There is anything like that that we can use to decide what's going on. But there was an appeal, okay? An appeal was against the decision was presented by a consumer advocacy organization. They presented this administrative appeal for review, and that's the first time we have a deeper argumentation about these national security arguments involving strategic sectors. So it was the first time, I repeat, we have in Chile this kind of debate within the legal procedures. Of course, the office rejected this appeal for two reasons. First, the type of appeal was not the correct one. This is very boring. I don't want to explain to you later, but there is like a procedural problem, procedural grounds. That the type of appeal wasn't the specific appeal for these procedures of antitrust law. Secondly, the organization didn't have a standing to bring. It didn't have like the active legitimacy to represent a part involved in the issue, in the case. So a lot of controversies started. This is important. This is the first time we see like a real political controversy involving Chinese company in Chile, I could say. Maybe there are some cases before, but not so relevant. There was an attempt, this is in Spanish, but this is just an example. It's not important, just to show that the first news start to come. This MP called Jaime Naranjo of Socialist Party also tried to propose a bill for creating a screening FDI screening mechanism. Of course, it didn't want to approve. And the whole debate was about the fact that the company State Grid is a state-owned company. Okay, so for the first time, Chilean law has to deal with a state-owned company investing in your country. Before that, it was like Spanish companies, like Safir or whatever, or Endesa, or Canadian mining companies. But this is the first time that we have some actors argue that this is different because there is a government behind the operation. And if you control the electricity of 3 million houses, it could be a problematic in the future if something happens. This is a little bit the argumentation. Of course, the political debate was very polarized, not so rigorously made. They talk about the Chinese empire. there was a lot of like ghosts, okay, a lot of common places around. But yeah, this is a little bit what happened. Of course, the operation was totally legal. There was no reason to stop it, and it came through. So actually, this first case proves that Chile has still a model of open economy, international open economy. Okay. So this is the case, and I repeat, this is a very important precedent because in Chile, until then, we have a large political consensus on the international economic open model of the country. Now we see some arguments against this radical openness, right? And also, still today, China is not yet, maybe it will, I don't know, in the future, is not yet a political cleavage in the electoral competition. Like if you are a politician, no, a political candidate in Chile or Argentina, you have to have a position against or for deepen the relation with China. As simple as that. Okay, it's a political cleavage, like left or right. So the same. China is a hot topic, I repeat, in the political life of Argentina or Brazil, not in Chile. Still, but this is, you know, this is the progress I'm trying to evolve. Okay, this is a more dramatic case, the second case, the passport saga. I mean, that's how the media call it, okay? El caso pasaportes. This is a bit far more problematic case because this is the proof that the Chilean administration was not ready at all to navigate the geopolitical changes. This is very clear. I'm a bit straightforward here, but I want to make my point, okay? The passport saga was very, very, very complicated. I'm talking about a failed public procurement with all the weight of the word failure, right? So there was a public tender to allocate a contract for a company to fabricate passports and IDs in Chile. Previously, it was a French company having this contract, okay? So the contract has expired, you have to make a new one. So you make a public procurement or public tender procedure to receive offers from private companies. So the Chinese one, it was a consortium between Eisino and Muhlbauer, a German company. They made their offer. It was the best one, the cheapest and the more efficient one of $222 million US. So in terms of amount of money, it's not much if we compare it with this 3-4 billion operation with lithium, with copper, etc., electricity. But in terms of political changes, it's very meaningful. So here, the administration really worked not so seriously. First, they gave the contract to this company, and then they changed their mind, so they revoked the decision, and they found the way to do it by asking Eisino more information. So once there is a public resolution, because in Chilean law, as in Spanish or French law, when you have a public resolution adopted, it has a presumption of legality. You cannot really go back to it so easily, okay? It's a binding document, a binding decision of the administration. So they have to find a way to revert the decision. So they ask Eisino for new information involving data security, privacy, and national security in China, asking about like Chinese regulation about data protection. And then they decided to revoke the decision and to give the contract to a French company, the same one that had the contract before. What is surprising here is that the new resolution in which the administration decided to revoke the first resolution, they openly talk about, I mean, they explicitly introduce as an argument for the decision, the risk of losing the United States waiver visa program. So listen, Chile is a Latin American country, but you can travel to the US with a Chilean passport. You can travel to the US as a tourist, as if you were from Hong Kong, no, actually, right? You need a visa. If you were from a Schengen passport, from Portugal or Spain or whatever, right? So this is a kind of a privilege, no? In the Latin American context, you know, other countries like Colombia and Mexico, to travel to the US, it could be very tricky, very difficult. You have maybe to wait for months to get an appointment in the US consulate to apply for a visa, and then etc. Right? So apparently, the decision of the administration was this: there is a risk of losing this privilege. Any government will not allow this to happen. It will be too costly politically for the president of Chile to go to the next election with this. Imagine this failure, right? So there was a no-go decision. There was no other choice to do what they did. But they have to operate a little bit outside of the law, I think. And also the decision quote a FDI document, which is here actually. You can download it. It's in the internet. It's a free access document of the FDI. in which they identify Icino, the company who won the contract, as a company who's using a malware, how do you call it? Backdoor malware, okay? So they accuse it of using a backdoor malware, which means that the Chinese government could access to all the information of this company. And by doing that, they will access of all the information of everyone having a Chilean passport or a Chilean ID. Because Chilean people can't travel to the US without a visa, that could be risky, and because they are like binationals, no? Chilean people with both passports, etc. So, well, the controversy here was much hotter than the previous case, of course. Many actors were involved, the civil registry service, like the public administration itself, the US embassy, the Chinese embassy, and a lot of experts and politicians, etc., came into the game. Some actors expressed the concern of foreign government accessing personal data of citizens. Others stated that, legally speaking, there is no reason to revoke the decision. It doesn't have any legal grounds. So it creates a very dangerous precedent. If Chile is showing off, if Chile is presumed to be an open economy with a high legal certainty, that is a FDI, a foreign investment friendly country, that's the reputation of Chile so far, this decision creates a very dangerous precedent, or the first time, politics bent law, right? The political reasons were more important than legal reasons in terms of economic public regulations. Well, yeah, so this is a little bit that. We know that there was a lack of coordination between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Home Affairs. We know that now. Apparently there wasn't a real crossing of information about this problem with the US. And we know that the US embassy actively threatened the government to take out the visa waiver regime. Well, this is a little bit the case. These are just some examples about people talking about it in the media. In the left, I have like these experts talking about it. Descuido político means like a political mistake or political lack of prevalence. Here at the right is my boss, Dorotea Lopez, also got an interview for this case. And then at right, we have another news, about the Chinese embassy protesting publicly and officially to the Chilean government about that discrimination. The Chinese company got discriminated by the public administration in Chile and created a public official diplomatic statement. Well, I repeat, this is a very important case because it's the first time that administrative decision has been based on a geopolitical factor, but a factor that is not regulated in any legal body. So that creates a situation of informality that can be dangerous in the future of Chile, of especially, as I say, the usual legal certainty that Chile is presuming to have in the last decades. Well, let's jump into the next case. This is very fast. This is very technical, so I'm gonna just go very fast. We're talking here about two public procedures, public law procedures. First, public concessions for building and exploiting public infrastructures, and second, the environmental impact assessment. Okay, there are two different legal bodies involved here. So the first concession awarded to a Chinese company was to build and exploit a dam, a water resource dam, okay, in 2018. It was celebrated at the time as a very important news in the media, as the first time a Chinese company is competing and winning contracts for competing with Spanish companies, American companies, and they are doing well. And that's good for the country because we have more options. When you make a public tender for such a thing like this, you have more offers, so it's more competitive, it's good, everybody wins, right? So actually it didn't, because the environmental impact assessment was wrong. The modeling of the water resources didn't met the real water resources that the company found. So they abandoned the project, the contract was broken, and the dam was half built in the middle of the countryside. So you talk about the environmental impact, what more than a half built infrastructure in the middle of nowhere, right? The problem here is that if you have to, who is responsible for this? Of course, it's the public administration of Chile. It's as simple as that. The technicians of the public administration of the environmental impact service didn't calculate well enough the modeling of water resources in the area. So everything went wrong, right? So both cases, the first one in 2018 and the other one a few years later. Both cases of two dams, the same problem about the water resources modelings. So yeah, I don't have much more to say. Both contracts were terminated. I repeat, no, without court litigation. The company didn't have to go to court to win. The administration had to admit its failure, responsibility. And also it's a very sensitive topic because the impact of climate change in Chile is creating more and more frequent droughts. The water is getting more and more complicated to have. And also we have, I was talking with Linda before at lunch that water, Chile is the only country in the world, I mean, the only country I know in the world, that water is a private good. And if you have the property of some land and the water goes through by a river, by whatever, you own this water. You don't have any obligation to let it through or to compensate the rest of the owners that are down the river, as they say. So this is the example of how market-oriented Chilean economic model is, or how neoliberal Chile is, right? Or still is. So this is a problem. Water is a very heavy problem. And yeah, so these are the two cases. We can go through with the documents itself. We can analyze why the water calculation were not so accurate, but this is to be related with the lack of administrative capacity, institutional capacity, as simple as that. Actually, we have now, in 2022, we passed a new law of climate change that now is compulsory to any environmental impact assessment. The administration has to have a whole chapter about the impact of climate change, especially in water. This is like a new law of climate change that passed a few years later. But even that, we don't have enough civil servants to do it well. Well, this is some controversies about these cases. Okay, let's finish with this, the more complicated one, the Trans-Pacific Internet Cable. So this is, as I say, no, this is the underseas internet cables, which now is a hot topic. I don't know if you read in the news, like this last year, like 2 cables were cut in the north of Europe, in the Baltic countries, by, I don't know if it was Russian or Chinese ships. So you see this hybrid warfare, they call it now. So internet cables are now, undersea internet cables are now key infrastructure for the new way of making warfare, and etc. So yeah, so this originally the project was to connect South America and Asia. First, the idea was to connect Valparaiso, it's a city in Chile, with Shanghai, and then it changed to Japan, and then it changed to Australia. So let's talk about what happened really here. So we know, I mean, there is a memorandum of understanding in 2016 signed between the Chilean government with the Chinese government. So the first route explored was the Chinese one, Shanghai one. Then there was a change of the decision. And as I said, finally, the contract was allocated to Google to build Australian-French Polynesia route. We know that the first decision came after Pompeo's visit in the first Trump administration. I mean, we know now that the decision was made after that visit in 2018. We didn't know that then, but now we know, I repeat, that this decision to drop the Huawei and Chinese route was decided there in 2018, 2019, and it was announced a bit later. And first was the alternative option of Australia and Japan, and then Australia and French Polynesia. Here is one of the documents in 2018 from the Ministry of Telecommunication of Chile. So they proved the different routes. So you see that in terms of geography, the cheapest and more efficient route is the Chinese one. Of course, there are other considerations to discuss. And also, as I tried to explain at the beginning of the presentation, the economic exchanges between Chile and China are quite big. They're not comparable to the economic exchange between Chile and Australia. So why to choose the Australian way? You see, the national interest here is not protected at all. And also, we have to remember that in 2016, during the presidency of Bachelet in Chile, was the left-wing president, Bachelet. It was a whole project of idea of creating Chile as a business hub and digital hub. So during that time, like, people were more optimistic than now. Chile was presenting itself as a business hub for Chinese companies and a digital hub for any other foreign companies that will install itself in Santiago. No? Santiago dreamed to be a little bit like Hong Kong or Singapore in the Latin American context. That was the idea in the 2010s. Okay, now not so much. So yeah, I think this, I don't have to add anything to this image. So this is a statement from the White House. No, sorry, the US Department of State celebrating the contract to Google. I mean, I don't have anything else to say. When Ministry of Foreign Affairs is like making statements to congratulate another government to make something like this, that proves how the decision was made with a discussion, with a conversation with the American government. This is just an example. This author, Jorge Yeung, ex-ambassador of Chile in China and in India, and he's currently a professor in Boston University. Jorge Yeung, he published a book with some other colleagues about, then he has a proposal of like an aging strategy for Chile. He calls it the active non-alignment. It's like a very big debate right now in Latin America. It was his book. It has been translated to English actually last year. It has been it has provoked a huge debate. So Jorge Yeung, he's very critical with this decision I just told you. And yeah, I mean, the idea is simple, no? Why Chile has to pay Google to build a trans-Pacific cable? It should be the other way around, right? I mean, Chile is poorer, America is. So you can see that here the national interests were not so well protected for geopolitical reasons. That's it. So the idea is, I mean, we're talking about a contract between Chilean government and Google company, which is one of the most valuable companies in the world. Like it's the third or the fourth, no, depending the day or the week. Well, the conclusions, as you may have guessed, are very simple. Chile doesn't have a legal framework so far to prevent these problems. So we are jumping into more and more informal situations, and the influence of or the pressure of the US Department is growing, which creates this impossible situation. We say no impossible situation in which you are economically dependent with China. Your exports, as I said, 40% of our exports go to China. Most of our copper goes to China. The copper industry moves around 40% of the total GDP of Chile. So you see how dangerous the situation is in which economically you depend with the trade on China. But the latecomer and not so important FDI from China in Chile is creating more and more situations in which you have to take decisions. The Chilean government has to take decisions that gets out of its tradition of being a reliable economy, of being a country open to international corporations for building infrastructure, for building big projects, that was characterized by this idea of legal certainty, seguridad jurídica o certeza jurídica, decimos en español. So this idea of legal certainty has been nuanced by these last cases. So yeah, I think we have to think out of the box here. Chile has to really, my recommendation, it's very long to explain, but I think to create a FDI screening procedure is not a bad idea. Actually, the example of the UK, is very positive in that sense. I mean, the FDI screening procedure is not against anyone. It doesn't really decrease the number of projects coming to the country, but it will give you more arguments to the Chilean government. You have this procedure to resist maybe the US pressure. You know what I mean? If you have a more transparent legal procedure for cases of public procurement and FDI, maybe you can resist a little bit better when the US State Departments try to change your decision. And we believe that this kind of situation is going to happen more and more, especially concerning public infrastructures and telecommunications and any kind of technology. So that's the presentation. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you. I think your conclusion and your case studies, really drive home the message that the relevance of the geopolitical shifts, right, that so dramatically played out in the last few days. It's also it's always with us. Okay, it's not only those more dramatic situations, but actually more mundane investment decisions, right? They are all affected by geopolitical. They're all affected by geopolitical considerations and changes. Now is the time for our discussion. So let us start with comments from our Linda Tjia. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me? It's okay. Thank you for the presentations. Very informative and systematic comparison of 4 cases. And also we got to know the background information between China and Chile's kind of trade and other cooperations. I myself also research about Chinese projects in the developing countries or so-called global South country. My focus is on Kazakhstan and Mongolia. So I share a lot of research our findings was this presentations which focus on Chile. Mostly we usually talk about, when we talk about Chinese investment in these countries, usually we're talking about these countries having a lot of raw materials export to China. So in this case, it's copper. And then they might have another export to add as an alternative export for income, in this case, cherry, but it's not enough. So the president of John mentioned about the manufacturing power is not very well. So they probably, when they seek foreign investment, including those from China nowadays, want to improve their development infrastructure and economic diversification. So I think most of them want very much to do so. But then in the process of negotiating for different projects, investment, and in making sure that all these initiatives will be able to carry through, in terms of presentation and also in terms of completion, it has so many challenges, right? And one major challenges I think mentioned today is about external influence, especially now we talk about the influence from US and also the Western allies. And then I would have two major points that I want to kind of elaborate. The first one is when all this kind of external influence, especially when we talk about national security today, I would think that this is a very legitimate reason to screen FDI or to monitor a lot of the projects, but it also is a concept that would be very easy to be manipulated by domestic and global stakeholders. It's very easy that they would use national security as a reason. Sometimes it may be an excuse, other times it may be over-exaggerate a bit, or sometimes it is very true concern, but it would be very easy to be manipulated. And in order how to avoid these kind of understanding or this kind of manipulation would be, as John mentioned towards the end of the presentation, how the country would be able to have its own capacity to resist. And then I would think that to move beyond the discussion of resistance of external influence would be to carry through its own domestic industrial development. And that's very important, not only to resist, but also you have your own principle of industrial development. In the country that I am more familiar with, Kazakhstan, I think they make two very good use of their tools in order to resist resistance and as well as to carry through industrial development. One is to play a multi-vector foreign relations strategies, that they don't commit to one particular countries or allies. They don't totally depend on China. They also don't listen or rely on the West. But in order to do that, in order to be able to stand hard in front of all these kind of international conflicts, they make very good use of their sovereign wealth fund. I think that's the most important thing. So they have a very well-structured sovereign wealth fund, which channel their oil-driven revenue into 3 different funds. And some of their fund will be used to invest in global market in order to make profit. So it's like an investment portfolio. And then the other part of the sovereign wealth fund will be used to develop its industry. And therefore, when they negotiate with international players they don't rely on their finance a lot. So they don't require Chinese, for example, Chinese government to provide concessional loan. They don't need it a lot. So a very interesting case is a recent joint venture between a local Kazakhstan's automobile company. It's actually not a really joint venture, but it's also a joint cooperation. It's because these local automobile cooperations enter into a contract with 3 different Chinese automobile companies to produce 3 specific Chinese model of EV in Kazakhstan. Yet none of these Chinese companies have a share. They don't have any share in this company. They just provide knowledge, engineers, assembly lines, specifications, scientific data to this local Kazakhstani automobile company so that they will be able to produce 3 cars, and then they don't have a share. That's then relates to the discussions of technology transfer. Right? So therefore, I think after
did they get the Chinese companies
markets? Yeah, massive market through Kazakhstan to the rest of the Central Asia, that they would be able to, put forth the 3 models, and each of them only provide knowledge, technology for the production of 1 model of them. So it's just 1 model, not the entire company's kind of research, R&D kind of things. So therefore, I think it's very difficult and very challenging for these countries when they are trying to get foreign capital and foreign technology, and yet would be able to come up with its own consistent industrial development policy. That's very difficult, and yet I think it would be good that each countries, despite their distinctive characteristics, let's say Kazakhstan is having a very distinctive characteristic because it's connecting to China. So therefore they have different concerns. Other countries obviously will have their own concerns, but it would be a good way that countries can share good practices in terms of how they will be able to leverage China and also the West investment. So I think in addition to legal framework, it is also important to look at other areas, including industrial policy, social welfare, and the finance of all these projects. So I think I will stop here, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Well, Juan, you want a quick response before we start the discussion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda, for these comments. I will read the papers you wrote about these topics. It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of jealous, of this Kazakhstan joint venture automobile project. Obviously, I think the Chinese companies are keen to do so. Chinese companies, I mean, the Chinese economic model in the 80s, 90s was built thanks to this kind of logic of you need an industrial policy, and for that you need transfer of technology. And in order to get the technology, you can create joint ventures to control the process, not just to sold out your country as some other countries did, right? So I think the Chinese actors are quite sensitive to this argument. They will understand it perfectly. The problem is that I don't want to be too straightforward, but I think our problem is the lack of a state. You don't have the institutional capacity to deal with these projects, so you just linger them on time. They are delayed, and then there are some informal decisions made by some external influence. So you see, I think we need more international relations professionals, maybe in the Chilean business sector and administration sector. I guess that's a trend I think we are going to see, and maybe not. I hope so, at least. And also, we need an industrial policy. I mean, I think what you say about industrial policy is the other leg of the idea, right? I mean, we have this concept of resilience. Everybody's talking about resilience, right? The United Nations talking about resilience is like the main word, one of the most usual terms used in the media right now. You need to improve the resilience of your country because the world is getting more and more dangerous. I hear this word repeat many, many times from many different places. So how do you build up some resilience? First, you need institutional capacity. I think we are witnessing how the states are coming back. It could be by subsidies, public subsidies to strategic sectors, as they are doing in Europe, in the US, in China, of course, since ever, etc. It could be by controlling the trade, to make some national security concerns about international trade, but also by industrial policy. For example, in Europe, we are talking, the European Commission is talking about strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy is a concept that it has been borrowed from the defense and security policies. It was a French concept about the military industry. So there's a French military industry, of course, is saying for decades that we need to buy more European weapons because they produce them than American ones. So this term then was used for everything. So now strategic autonomy is like this K word that it can be used for anything, and it started to be used during the pandemic when the European citizens realized that they don't have the capacity to produce facial masks. You see, neither paracetamol. So we didn't have paracetamol, we didn't have facial masks, and we are one of the most developed and richest places in the world. This paradoxical situation. So they start subsidizing their own industries. So you need an industrial policy. How to fund it, how to find the money for this, of course, is the key. Chile has also a sovereign fund based on the exports on copper. So that will be something to study. But I have to be honest with you. I think I have some colleagues who are political economists like yourself. They keep insisting every time. They are very critical. They say that we don't really have an industrial policy in Chile. We may start to have one in the next years. The national strategy on lithium adopted by the current President Boric evolves into something more concrete. So the new lithium strategy, it looks like it could be a real industrial policy for Chile, and it will try to do projects as the joint venture you were mentioning before. So I think some actors in Chile understand this, but still the neoliberal or the market-oriented ideology is still very strong. So it's not so easy, to talk about these projects. It's not so easy to make people understand how we have to think out of the box, and we have to learn from other countries, not just European and American and the US. We need to really to see how we can improve our resilience by improving our administration, but also by start to produce things in your territory, not just import everything manufactured. And for that, you need an industrial policy and a strong administration. So yeah, I think it's a very good case. Thank you very much, Linda.
Okay, so let's we will have a little bit about more than 30 minutes time for Q&A and discussion. So participants from this room and also online are most welcome to raise questions and comments. Anyone from this room first? Well, if not, I got a questions from participant member from University of Barcelona. Yes. Would you like to raise your questions directly?
Okay, wonderful. Good morning. Can you hear me? Good afternoon for you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Wonderful. Very interesting presentation. My question will go to your very good elaboration on the questioning the legal certainty in Chile that Chile has been, especially in the region, very famous for over the years. So I've been wondering whether the argument of challenge to legal certainty and also non-transparency on the side of the state of Chile has been appearing much in the context of the lithium deal that you have already mentioned, when the deal of one of the Chinese investors, the business of one of the Chinese investors has been significantly affected by the policy, by the current lithium policy. And I've been further wondering, what is your assessment, legal assessment, speaking from your lawyer perspective of that deal, and whether there are any further attempts now currently after exhausting certain avenues by TNG to further address that, or is it a closed case? Everybody's trying to live with that because, as you say, like the case of lithium, not only in Chile, but in many and the jurisdictions in the region is indeed one of the key focuses currently. And I would love to hear a little bit more about it, how the things are being seen from the side of Chile. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Monica. Muchas gracias. I hope everything is doing well back in Barcelona. So yeah, I mean, of course, I didn't introduce the case of SQM Anti-Anchi in the presentation. I was hoping that somebody was going to mention it in the discussion. It's a hot topic. So as I said in my presentation, in 2018, Tianchi bought 24% of the stakes of SQM, which is a Chilean company, and it happens to be like the third global producer of lithium in the world. Okay, you have Tianchi, you have the American Adermale, and then you have SQM. So what is the legal analysis of this? It's complicated. So first, we have to point out a very specific fact of the regulation of lithium in Chile. This is a bit surprising, but the lithium is considered by law in Chile as the specific term is called non-consensible, no concesionable. Like you cannot, you cannot apply the regime of concessions I was talking about before, and you cannot just sell the land where the mine is. You can do that in copper. You can sell a mine of copper, but you cannot sell a land where lithium reserves are. Why is that? Apparently, it's for security reasons, but during another age, another time. It was during the military dictatorship or military government, as you want to call it. Lithium was considered a key element for nuclear technology. So there was a law in past, I think it's 81, I remember the moment, that forbid, the Chilean state to sell I repeat, the lithium mines or the land where lithium is, or to allow a private company to own it. So that's the first thing. So it's a bit by accident that in Chile we have this, okay? So that means that there is a specific public contract for lithium extraction. It's not the common law public procurement contract, it's a specific one. And then we have a new development with the government of Boric. They adopted the first national policy or strategy on lithium. It's called like this, National Strategy on Lithium. But this is just like a white paper, we say in the European Union, like I will say a flyer or a brochure, it's like a very nice PDF document with a lot of images and a lot of very wishful thinking objectives, but there is no budget, there is no law, there is no legal body on it yet. So they used to identify a few objectives. Of course, the environmental protection is one of them, which is a bit hard to believe because I'm sorry, but to extract lithium, you have to destroy the salar. No, how do you say salar in English? I don't remember. Like where the lithium is in this salares, this salt sea. There's no other way to destroy the lithium than to empty the water out of it. So you can, of course, protect some of them. Some of the salares are the sea salts are identified as more biodiversity and also with major importance for indigenous people living in the area in the north of Chile, in the Atacama Desert. So some specific sea salt can be protected by the traditional legal instrument of protecting and forbidding activities in one specific land. But the rest of them, they could be exploited. So that's the first objective, the environmental protection. The second objective is very aligned with we were talking in the discussion, to implement a first national policy, industrial policy. So in order to do that, we have two options. The strategy of lithium in Chile, they identified the possibility to create a new state-owned company. That would be like the second one. With Codelco. Codelco is an state-owned company. It's the biggest copper producer in the world. It's the only big state-owned company that survived in Chile the military dictatorship and all the market-oriented reforms that occurred in the 70s and 80s. So the first idea was to create a new, state-owned company. Apparently, there is not the political capital to do so because Boric doesn't have you need to pass a bill for that you have to adopt a new bill to create a state-owned company. That's in the Constitution of Chile. You cannot do it just like that by executive order. So you need to go through the Congress, and the president doesn't have the majority of the Congress, right? So what do you do? What we did is to give this contract, this specific contract, not to sell the lithium, but to give the exclusive right to exploit some specific sea salt to a private company, they give it to a consortium between Codelco and SQM. Okay, so it was like a national protectionist decision, if you want. They didn't want to give it to foreigners. So in that way, it's more connected to the new development that we are talking today. Of course, the objective is to get some technology transfer. I don't know if we're going to have it or not. Also during the Piñera government, the previous government, there was some attempts to make something similar and exchanging like the right to exploit lithium in exchange to install factories in the north of Chile to create like to produce some of the most basic elements of the lithium batteries. They didn't work out. They were allocated to some companies, Chinese are not, but it was not profitable. So they used, it's another case of how the administrative resilience didn't work out. These contracts were canceled, were revoked because they were not lucrative enough. So now we're trying to do the same. Let's see what happens. So this contract was given to a consortium, I repeat, of Codelco and SQM for nationalistic reasons. And what is the controversy here? The controversy is very simple. Tianqi was very, very mad about it. There was apparently expectations in Tianqi company that they could get the contract too. It could be more contracts allocated to more companies. One of them for Tianqi, and it didn't. So you see how it works. So Tianqi has 24% of the SQM. I mean, when I talk with some people who are experts on this kind of financial operation, they told me that Tianqi, when the Tianqi bought 24% of the stakes, they overpaid. It was more expensive. It was more, they were paying too much for, I mean, at that moment, 2018, lithium was not even a common topic. Nobody talked about lithium, remember? So apparently the strategy of Tianqi was to buy 24% 2018 and keep buying more stakes until they could control the, how do you call it in English, sorry, the General Assembly of Stakeholders, Junta Accionistas, like the Assembly of Stakeholders, and then they will have a say, a veto right when this kind of situation came. They didn't. So when the situation came and the government allocated the contract, not to Tianqi, but to a local company, SQM and Codelco, they tried to make the assembly of stakeholders happen. It didn't work out because they don't have enough majority to do so. So in terms of legal assessment, I don't know if there is any, if Tianqi really went further, went to court or make any administrative appeal. I don't think so. I mean, I was checking the news closely during this happened. It was 6 months ago or so. It was 2024. All of this happened. It was all over the media. Like the whole country was talking about how Tianqi felt tricked. It was another, wave of news about like complaining from discriminating Chinese companies again. So I don't think there is any more legal dimension of this topic of the lithium. It was a political decision and apparently it's legally sound. So maybe this is the case of a Chinese FDI by the operation of 2018 that kind of worked quite well for Chile, or at least for the owners of SQM, who I remind you is a company, a public company listed in New York, not even in Chile. So, I mean, the owners of the stakes, they really got very rich. I don't know if the country can say the same, I don't think so. But at least the new government, who actually bodies have tried to protect a little bit the national interest. Let's see how it ends. But the lithium strategy, I repeat, we're still waiting for the bill. There is no a specific bill in the Congress that will be, when the specific bill will be passed, we will see what is going on. Now we're just exploring. We didn't even know how many resources of lithium we have in Chile. We're only exploiting like, it was like, I remember like 5%, something like that. So it could be a lot of people are saying more in economic terms than legal terms that maybe Chile is missing the chance. I mean, lithium prices are quite low now compared to a few years ago, but they're still high. There is other technologies competing with lithium, specifically the green hydrogen, that Japan is really betting on it, for instance, European Union too. So let's see if the lack of institutional capacity, or in this case, is more the lack of political capital. Like the president of Chile is not able to make structural reforms because of the constitutional design of the country, because of the lack of capital. Maybe we will miss the chance to go further into the industrial policy. But time will tell. Maybe next year or in 2 or 3 more years, I can tell you more about this. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. and very detailed response. More questions and more comments? Yes, Professor Lin Feng.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Juan, for your very detailed presentation. I have one question, which is mainly from the legal aspect. If you look at, it's surprising to know that Chile actually doesn't have a national security review mechanism relating to FDI. And we did a book last year to compare different jurisdictions, FDI, national security review legal mechanisms of FDI in different jurisdictions. But here, my concern is, I don't know whether you mentioned that it's better to have a sort of, to establish a legal mechanism to conduct the national security review or legal review of FDI. I agree, I think that would be better. But I look at the practices of different countries in the last few years, and also the US Supreme Court's judgment in the TikTok case. And I actually wonder whether it will make any difference at all. The reason to say that is, you see, when you come to the national security, whether a particular FDI constitutes a national security concern to a country. And essentially, it's the executive branch's decision on that. And if you look at the US Federal Supreme Court's judgment, the courts will give deference to the decisions made by the executive branch. So essentially, it's the executive branch which will make the decision that will actually be the final decision in it. And whereas the executive branch's decision, I would say, mainly is a political decision, as you've said. And there, and as a lawyer, I'm actually more and more pessimistic when national security issue is raised, whether there's much room for a legal mechanism to play a really important role.
Thank you very much, Professor Lin Feng. I'm glad that you came to the seminar. Thank you very much for your presence. It's a great honor to have you here and see you again. So, yeah, I think I will have to read the book you mentioned. I will do it with a lot of interest, and it will help a lot the paper we are writing down right now about this. I really think so. And I thank you very much for making a summary of the findings you had of your own analysis. And you know about this more than I do. So, but I think it kind of confirms my intuition. I put it here somewhere in the PowerPoint. I mean, let's be frank here, okay? As a lawyer, when we talk about national security, we are dealing with an unknown legal concept, like a UFO, It's like an unknown flying object, like unknown legal concept. National security, as a lawyer, when you hear it, but it could be even a few years ago, like 10 or 20 years ago, it's a concept that has increased the discretionary powers of the administration. Period. I mean, let's not forget what we're talking about. National security, I repeat, is an instrument, historically speaking, it's not new. It's not with the Trump administration or with the pandemic that has been in legal bodies for centuries, right? When we talk about national security, is to increase, I repeat, the discretionary power of administration. It doesn't have to be arbitrary. It's just more discretionary. So there are more and more reasons to increase. I was talking about the answer of the discussion. We're witnessing times of where the state comes back in every country. The states are really arming up themselves, not just with weapons, but with civil servants, offices, anything, any kind of resources, right? It could be also a legal resource will be to have more national security, the national security concept all over your legal body, all over your legal system. It could be for import, for export, for investment, for public procurement and so on. No? So there is this American author, Fishman, talking about economic warfare. He's an international relations author. He mentioned that, no? Like national security is another instrument in the economic warfare dealing with the world. So we're witnessing a new geopolitical scenario that is not so friendly for lawyers, that we like legal certainty, because it's like, for example, I teach law too, like in administrative law and international law. So yeah, when your students come and say, okay, you are teaching me all this legal body and precedents and everything, and then you just told me at the end of the class, you told me that this case that like contradicts everything you say before, no? It puts you in a very bad situation. Like how can you convince your students about to have faith on the rule of law? Because without faith, let's be honest here, the rule of law is an ideology, as any other. The Marxism-Leninism is another ideology. It's like that. It's a liberal ideology. How to make them have some faith in that ideology? If at the end of the day, there is this national security concept that can increase the power of the executive, and without much elaboration, technical or not. But the judges have to, the TikTok case, as you said, confirm that at the end of the day, when there is national security, the judges, the independent judicial branch cannot really interfere in the executive powers. So I think it is as simple as that. So in order to adapt to the new times, countries as middle-sized powers or middle-sized countries or small countries such as Chile, I think they will have to update their software. They have to update their public economic law, introducing national security. But the only way to avoid arbitrary, to fall, from discretionary power to arbitrary powers will be to, I repeat, create more administrative resilience. So when you introduce an article of national security in a bill that already exists, or the antitrust law or public procurement law, I'm sorry, but this article is going to be very vague. It's the idea of a UFO. No? It's an unknown legal concept. You can put anything there. There is no other way to do it. But when the administration use that concept to make a decision, they will have to give grounds to it. You make a resolution, you have to write it down. It will be like 20 pages instead of 5 pages. You have to really enumerate every reason why security law, why national security is involved in this and this. You know what I mean? So in that way, you need better lawyers in the administration too. It's like the example I give you about the passport saga. The last resolution of the passport saga is to revoke the first decision that was giving the contract to a Chinese company. I'm sorry, but that doesn't have anything to do with law. They are even quoting FBI, the Federal Bureau Institute, the FBI, sorry, of the US about some software. That I never seen that in my life. Like administration quoting some website of foreign agency or security when you are dealing with something else. So I don't think we have the choice but to increase the national security concerns in more and more legal texts of economic administrative law in Chile and other countries. But in order to do so in a controlled matter, you need to have a more resilient administration, so we don't fall from discretion to arbitrary decisions, right?
Thank you. Well, yes, Bill.
Bill Taylor from within CityU. A couple of questions, but one is related. They sound technical, but we can discuss a broader aspect. In the first case, the energy, it was blocked on the grounds of it being the Chinese state. Would it have made any difference had it been Chinese private companies, or did that just make it easier for them? Was there any debate, particular issues about this being state-owned? And I'm wondering this in the context of, companies like Fujitsu or IBM, which are private companies, but they're almost totally dependent on the state for contracts. Whether this idea of the state-owned enterprise makes a difference in the discussion. And the second one was to do with this, in the passport, that it was a Chinese-German company. And, one part of that is, did the German company say anything in this, and how did that fit in? Or was this a joint venture set up for the purpose of doing the contract? In other words, it's kind of window dressing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. It's a very good questions. We can go a little bit deeper now in the cases. So the second question, no, the German company didn't say nothing. The German embassy didn't become an actor in this game. On the contrary, not to the US and the Chinese ones. It was a temporary, we call it in Chilean law, we call it a temporary companies union. So you don't have to create a joint venture. I mean, you don't have to create a new company. You just have to make some paperwork for the offer, to propose the offer. So I think in Hong Kong should be the same. Actually, I see it in some manufacturer price. I can see that. I read the paper, the panels, and I see that. I don't remember the name. I'm sorry, the exact term in common law. This is called like a temporary union of companies that are offering. The German company didn't say anything. I was talking I was explaining that so first they gave the contract to the Chinese German company, then they revoke it. So before revoking it, so I mean, first you decide to give the contract, and then you have to sign the contract. So between these two moments, the decision was made to revoke the decision to give the contract. So in that meanwhile, they found the way they found, the administration found, was to ask for further information, for additional information but only to the Chinese company. And that was actually an argument from the Chinese company and the Chinese embassy. That was a discrimination because they then, this letter of asking for new information, additional information, which is totally out of procedure here. Like that doesn't exist. You cannot just ask for new information what you have like months and months of public tendering with a lot of changes, with a lot of documents going in and out. So then you decide. So this specific formal action of asking for information was only addressed to the Chinese one. That was something they made it very clear. And the further development, actually, I used to joke about this all the time with my colleagues. To say, I wish I could be the lawyer of IC now, because that would be a very easy case to win. And we have this thing called in Chilean law, it's called the patrimonial, like, I don't know how to say it, it's like the economic responsibility of the administration, let's call it. So if the administration make a decision that is, I mean, you go to court, no? Trying to attack, not to revoke the decision that we're talking here, you will say very easily that the Chilean administration make a decision, the final one, to revoke the contract. Without legal solid argumentation, without legal motives. It will be, I think, it's kind of obvious. I mean, I'm speculating a little bit, but not so much, because this is a very typical case in administrative law, okay? Like, for example, like any company who builds buildings, I don't know, like public housing in Hong Kong, or any kind of infrastructure, you will have to make a tender, a public tender. If you don't win the public tender, you will hire a lawyer, try to revoke the decision. It's very common. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets mad at it. It's a free market society. Sometimes you lose a tender. You suspect that maybe you will have won it. You try to go to court. Okay, that's how the free market works. So I repeat, it's a very common lawsuit. Here it was like the most obvious lawsuit in this kind of topics. I think perfectly, ICINO could have got a compensation of the full amount of the contract without doing the contract, without executing the service. We will get a compensation of $222 million easily. But apparently it was a political decision in Beijing, I guess, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I don't know where in China, to don't do so. So the Chinese, to what they say off the record to other actors, I mean, I heard, I'm not sure, it is a bit gossip, but when we're talking about diplomacy, national security, as we are suggesting, there is a lot of black boxes that we cannot really open here, right? Some colleagues or diplomats told me that the Chinese embassy told them that they won't go to a lawsuit, they won't sue on Chile government to don't deteriorate furthermore the relationship. So they will, but I repeat, in terms of, I mean, I'm speculating because this is not a fact. This is an analysis. It could have been easily won. And I don't think the geopolitical influence will have played a role there, because in the judicial independence or the independence of the judiciary body, it will be much harder to nuance than a decision taken inside an office of a ministry. So yeah, so first question, about the state-owned company nature, of state grid and the investment in the electric sector. in legal terms, we don't have anything like that. It has never occurred any lawmaker in Chile to make a difference between a state-owned company and a non-state-owned company. They don't even know what's a state-owned company. Only Codelco, no, the copper one. And it's so technocratically driven, and the political will is so small that, you know what I mean? So there is a very big ignorance about what does it mean a state-owned company in an authoritarian country. So there was no legal body prepared. There was nothing to deal with it. So it happened what it happened. But the political controversy, the noise around the case pointed out all over again and again, that the problem was that it's a state-owned company in an authoritarian regime. We make a little piece with some colleagues, there is in Spanish, but it could be easily translated, a policy brief, no, like a policy paper about these two cases. And my colleagues, I did more like the legal aspect, and my colleagues are anthropologists. They made like the analysis of like public discourse. And they were very critical with the public discourse because they were saying, my colleagues were Chilean, based in Chile too, they were saying something like, the public debate around the nature of a state grid company is marked by Orientalism. They were saying that there was a very big ignorance what does it really means to be a state-owned company in China. No? There were no any deep analysis, any deep argument. Just state-owned, dictatorship, communist bad, liberal Westwood. This kind of like Cold War mentality. And a lot of ignorance about what exactly means, no, in the Chinese political regime, how much independence does a state company has or not. So yeah, I think they were applying a little bit like the Cold War mentality here, but only in the political debate. I repeat, not in the legal debate. And also, these voices were quite minoritarian. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Where just a few MPs really sound the alarm. Actually, most of the actors, I think they were not worried at all about this case, about the operation, because I mean the company was already in foreign hands, right? So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Well, I would have a question from a political science perspective. In fact, I would say, the word politics does not appear anywhere on the topic of your seminar, right? Even though actually politics is everywhere in the discussion and very much in the backdrop and also in the process of consideration. A while ago, before we come to, before the seminar, we have a lunch, and then over lunch we talk a bit about, the constitutional amendments, the proposals to revise the constitutions. Two proposals has been rejected in popular referendum in recent last few years, despite the fact that the proposals, occur at the backdrop of some major uproar, discontent in the society, seeking change, right? But at the end, as a result of the referendum, the 1989 old pre-existing constitution still stands, right? So that reflects a bit the complexities in the politics, right? Among the political elites, that is people, including people drafting the constitutions, proposals, right? And also obviously the popular voters who has voted in the referendum. So my question in this context is, because you mentioned that given the backdrop, right, the geopolitical tension, so Chile FDI regime is actually facing, a lot of challenges from its pre-existing mode of neoliberalism, right? Through the number of case studies you just share with us, there's a politics crept in quite obviously, conspicuously, and people are actually struggling how to deal with it, right? But politically, how do the general public and how do the political elites in the corridors of power, how do they perceive such pressures? So because I think that kind of mood and it's really essential to anticipate what the government or the society would accept, right? What kind of change would be forthcoming, given the fact that Chile has been practicing such a free market kind of system, right? In investment, including foreign direct investment.
Thank you very much, Linda, for this very challenging question. I'm sorry if I'm too critical here, but this is my training, a critical thinker. Okay, I really believe that the Chilean elites are not making the right questions here. And also I believe that, and this is not an intuition, I think this will be shown with data, no? That there is a growing divorce, a growing distance between the political economic elites and the rest of the country, as in many places in the world, not just in Chile, right? So I'm a bit worried about the future of industrial policy in Chile, the future of foreign relations, international relations with foreign policy, sorry, in Chile too. Like if I try to imagine what the average Chilean person thinks about Chinese influence or China-US rivalry, how it affects their country, their day-to-day life, I don't think they care much. I think this is a very common trend, unless you're in a country in war or in a country with a war nearby, like Germany. It's a common trend that foreign policy doesn't matter. You don't win election with foreign policy. Let's be clear. You win elections about, talking about the welfare state, about employment, about immigrants, about some, national security idea. But you don't win elections talking about foreign policy. Foreign policy is maybe the public policy that is the farthest to the common folk. Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's a bit straightforward assessment, but I really believe so. Unless I repeat, you are in a European country in Central Europe, very close by, like Poland or Germany. Of course, the war in Ukraine will have an influence in the election, as we did see recently, right, in Germany. But you need a war for that. So the average common folk in Chile, I think they are very happy to see Chinese influence in their country. The soft power is building up. I say no, the cars. I mean, I compare it with Spain. In Chile, the cars are cheap. I mean, I don't know, let's talk like a working class person with an average salary in Chile can afford a car. In Spain, you cannot afford a car because we are putting tariffs to Chinese cars. So a car like the same car in Chile will cost like 40% or 50% less than in Spain. So that's day-to-day life. It matters, especially when you are not so rich, isn't it? Another very important topic is this, we call it mall chino, like Chinese shopping mall. They are a little bit everywhere in the country. This is part of the urban landscape. So people have been familiarized with these shops. The same thing for food. The Chinese restaurant, one of the first restaurants opening up in Chile. Chile has a very, very short tradition in hospitality sector. Like people used to eat at home, not outside. So in the 90s, 80s, 90s, started to be some restaurants that the first one were Chinese, then Peruvian, and then of course anywhere in the world. So they also know that. So they think there is, the perception is not, and they have some colleagues making surveys. They are starting to making questions about China. There is no real data of anything against China particularly. They believe that it's not cool to don't have a democracy. There's something like moral judgment about the lack of democracy in China, but not more than that. No? So I think the Chinese foreign policy of non-intervention in internal affairs, is a very good strategy. And if they manage to do as the Kazakhstan, like try to transfer some technology and create not just like to create more jobs and create more infrastructure, especially infrastructure, if they start to do some big result in Latin America, I think the soft power will grow up. Like I was in 2019, I wrote a paper, and at that time there was a project of building up a high-speed train in Chile, or bullet train in Chile between Valparaiso and Santiago. So it's very long to explain. I don't want to get to bore you, but it was a Chinese company with a local company trying to push a specific public contract that didn't work out. And you know why it didn't work out? Because it was a Spanish company who got the contract, and they made a non-high-speed train, like a traditional train, which is not much better than we have already, but whatever. because Valparaiso is where the biggest port of Chile is next to it. So it was for that too, not just for people, but for container. So actually, if there is no high-speed train in South America, there is not even one. The first high-speed train that is built in South America, if it is with a Chinese company, that will be a very strong political gesture, and it will increase the soft power. They are doing that in Africa with football stadiums. I don't remember, it was Kenya. There are like 2 or 3 cases of that, of some football stadium built up with by Chinese companies. This is a way of building soft power. You have to understand something, like public infrastructures in South America is maybe one of the strongest problems we have. It's when you are in China, you forget about it. So many infrastructure. Even Hong Kong is like the most market-oriented region in China. You even have public infrastructure that they are world-class, isn't it? Like the MTR station is like a cathedral. It's like for me, it's like a monument of the new times, of the connectivity era. Of the globalization era we're living. Connectivity, like the historical Belt and Road. So like high-speed train terminals, MTR terminals, these kind of buildings are the new cathedrals of our time. Manuel Castells talks about it in the Network Society in his book of 1998. Was the first person to try to point this out. So I think the bullet train will help, but it's already helping. And the elite is not doing the right questions because they don't see this. And I'm sorry to say that, but for example, they are. It's a bit. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't really get it. But there is a lot of discussion going on in Chile about making some kind of alliance, not a real one, but more like a deepening up our relationship with European Union. You're like thinking in a multipolar world, in an increasing multipolar world. So for I don't know which reasons, European Union will be the most reliable or better choice for Chile, especially with the lithium industry. It's weird. I think it's just because I have to go. I think it's just because of like a comfort zone or like a path dependence, like the elites or diplomats or policymakers. They studied in Spain or they studied in the UK, so they know Europe. They have some contacts there, so they just keep doing what they know how to do. No? They don't really come much to China. So you know what I mean? It's a bit strange that another debate was about the BRICS. Should Chile join the BRICS or not? Because the BRICS summit is happening in Brazil this year. So some people were asking, including myself, that maybe Chile should ask to join the BRICS. And so some colleague wrote a column on the newspaper about that. So colleague from the Institute of International Affairs, and the media campaign against it was huge. Was a very, very, very big backlash, a very big reaction. And they were saying that no, we should keep US and Europe as our traditional allies. That was like 2 or 3 weeks before Trump was took into the office. Maybe they won't say the same thing now.
Well, the lesson we learn, these days is, obviously, we can, even friends sometimes argue and have quarrel and have sometimes infighting, right? Family have infighting as well. But still, it's better to have more friends than fewer, right? So I think time is running out, okay? We are so pleased that we had Professor Juan joining us today, and so many participants coming in and guests coming in, so we have a very fruitful and informative and engaged discussion this afternoon. So let us give a warm applause to our speaker and our discussant and to ourselves, okay? So thank you so much. See you next time.